Hi, this is One God Ministries, and we are on our YouTube video 21, The Parable of the Mustard Seed. Jesus Christ told the people a parable in Matthew 13, verse 31. He said, "The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed which a man took and planted in his field, though it is the smallest of all the seeds. Yet when it grows, it is the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and perch in its branches." So we may wonder what is meant by this parable. What is symbolized by the mustard seed that grew into a huge tree? So what could this all mean? To answer this, we should try to understand what a mustard seed is. A mustard seed is so small, it is slightly smaller than a pinhead. Yet when it grows, it becomes the largest of garden plants and becomes a big tree, so that the birds of the air come and perch in its branches. So the parable is actually symbolic of the kingdom of heaven, in particular, the salvation of man, which starts out as something so small, almost unnoticeable. So, what could this be? How could the salvation of man start out as something so small? The answer could be found in the Bible. In Romans 10, verse 17, it is stated, "Consequently, faith comes from hearing the message, and the message is heard through the word of Christ." So, salvation starts from hearing the gospel message. Someone telling another person about the gospel message. It starts by hearing. Okay? For in the gospel, according to Romans 1:17, a righteousness from God is revealed, a righteousness that is by faith from the first to last, just as it is written, "The righteous will live by faith." That means people become righteous by living by believing. Okay, so as we have said earlier, it starts by someone telling another person about the word of Christ, the gospel, and that other person then hears and believes what he just heard. And that is the start of righteousness. It then progresses into what is known as faith, which is nothing more than believing, which in Greek is pistis, in the original word used in the Bible. It then progresses into the process of Christian maturation and character formation, which is called by the Apostle Paul as walking in the Spirit. In Romans 8, verse 13, the Apostle Paul stated, "For if you live according to the flesh, you will die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the deeds of the body, you will live." And we will see what he meant by living in the Spirit and that of living. So that thing that was heard, the word of Christ, and was believed in which faith grew on, matures into something grand and glorious eventually. For in Romans 8 verse 14, the Apostle Paul stated, "For as many as are led by the Spirit of God, these are the sons of God." So the saved Christians, actually those who heard and have believed on the word of Christ and walk in the Spirit, will eventually become sons of God and actually become immortal. That is why in Corinthians 15 verse 51, 1 Corinthians 15 verse 51, the Apostle Paul tells us, "Listen, I tell you a mystery. We will not all sleep, but we will all be changed in a flash, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, the dead will be raised imperishable, and we will all be changed. For the perishable must clothe itself with the imperishable, and the mortal with immortality." So what he is saying in here is this: we who are mortals eventually will become immortal. We who are perishable will put on imperishability. So he continues in verse 54, he stated, "When the perishable has been clothed with the imperishable, and the mortal with immortality, then the saying that is written will come true: death has become swallowed up in victory." So eventually, immortal means there will be no more dying. And that is what is meant, that if we walk in the Spirit, we will live. Okay, so we see in here the process. It starts from hearing the word of Christ, from believing, and goes into believing, and then matures into walking in the Spirit. And eventually, the time will come when this perishable body will put on imperishability and become immortal, actually. In Revelation 21 verse 6, it is stated, "And he said to me, It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end." And this is the Almighty God speaking. And he continues, "I will give of the fountain of the water of life freely to him who thirsts. He who overcomes shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he shall be my son. But the cowardly, the unbelieving, that is, those who do not have faith, the abominable, the murderers, the sexually immoral, the sorcerers, the idolaters, and all liars will have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone." And this is what was meant earlier, that if we walk in the flesh, we will die. You will die. You will die in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls filled with the 7 last plagues came to me and talked to me, saying, "Come, I will show you the bride, the Lamb's wife." Okay, so this is actually the glorious ending of what started out as something so small in hearing the word of Christ, the message, and believing and walking in the Spirit. Eventually, that person who hears and believes and walks in the Spirit will actually bloom eventually and end up as the Lamb's wife, immortal, with an imperishable body. Okay, so this is the symbolism of the very small mustard seed, which eventually grew into a huge mustard tree. So with this, I hope I have clarified a lot of things about this very beautiful parable of the mustard seed. So I thank you for listening and subscribe. I suggest that you subscribe to One God Ministries and listen to our other videos. Thank you for listening.